Watch this.
Welcome to the week that was. Idaho lawmakers now have one of the biggest shifts for public school funding in their hands. Education savings accounts are now being considered to pay for your little one's learning. Another attempt at limiting the LGBTQ community is also being considered at the State House. We consider two sides to this issue, one from Idaho and one that isn't. You could be owed a boatload of cash, or maybe just some loose change. Well, there's one other place you can look other than your couch cushions. We're taking a look back at the big stories we covered this week. This is the 208. All right, welcome to the Friday show of the 208. We're going to take a look back, as we said, at some of the stories we've covered this week and share some of the comments about those stories that we didn't have time to share on those days. This week was a big one at the Idaho State House. We got our first official look at the Freedom Caucus's idea of what we should do with Idaho's education budget. Senate Bill 1039 is the Fund Students Not Systems bill, the one that establishes education savings accounts in Idaho. They say it will open up the options for parents, giving them the choiciest of school choice when it comes to where they can send their kids to school, public, private, religious, or at home. And parents would get about $5,900 per kid to pay for it. And that money would come from what the state already pays each school district per student per year. 80% of it would go into an ESA account, or an ESA, I should say, which would be that $5,900, leaving the other 20% with the school. Now, those who crafted the bill, it was introduced by Republican Senator Tammy Nichols, who said it was modeled after Arizona's, which basically came from a copy and paste build your own bill form letter constructed by the American Legislative Exchange Council. On Tuesday, we heard from the Mountain States Policy Center. On Wednesday, we heard from Idaho Business for Education. On both days, we heard from you.
I think there's a lot of fear that schools are going to be shut down. There's a lot of groups out there saying education choice means shutting down public schools. It does not mean shutting down public schools. It means making public schools better.
It does mean less money for public schools.
I mean, the money does not belong to the school. It belongs to the child's education.
But according to Idaho's Constitution, it shall be the duty of the legislature to establish and maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public, free common schools. Cargill argues that doesn't account for everyone.
If you're one of the 10 to 15% of students in the state right now who are not in the public school system, you're not getting a benefit from the state from that constitutional requirement.
Okay, let's talk about private school kids. History shows in any place that has these ESAs that 60 to 80% are the ones that are enrolling in this and basically subsidizing their private education. That it's not so much people who are jumping out of failing schools and then going to a private school. It's those that are already there. So how is this not just benefiting those kids that are already there?
Well, first of all, I would dispute the number 60 to 80%.
However, that's exactly what Arizona's Department of Education found this past fall when their ESAs became universal. About 75% of their applicants were never enrolled in any public school prior.
You can be a millionaire in Arizona and still get $7,000 per student. So this isn't about helping these poor kids in failing schools. This is about providing direct government subsidies to families whose kids never went to public schools. That is the pattern. That's where the huge cost comes in. One legislator was accusing the governor of socialism yesterday for trying to give $8,500 for graduating seniors so they could go on to college, and he called it socialism. Well, this is socialism on steroids. You're just passing out money like it's candy.
80% of which will no longer sweeten the pot of Idaho's public schools.
But the real rub here is the pressure this puts on the state general fund. Something's got to give. And in Idaho, we're not going to raise income taxes or sales taxes to fund all these new school systems. That's why it's going to fall on the property taxpayers.
The argument is this is supposed to stop or help a failing system, that Idaho's public school system is not, we keep throwing money at it, it's not doing what it's supposed to do.
That's garbage. We rank 51st in the country per student funding, 51st. And yet our national assessment scores are well above the national average.
Even according to the Heritage Foundation, whose mission is to promote conservative public policies, Idaho schools offer the biggest bang for our buck. Speaking of bucks, Karen from Garden City says, We are unfortunately far away from Thomas Jefferson's ideal of a good, free education for all citizens. If you have money, you get a good education. If you're poor, oh well, sucks to be you. And Arlene says, I pay taxes to the government for government services, such as public schools, not to individuals. Parents can choose what to do with their kids. I don't care, just not on my dime. Brenda in Star wants to know, how much will the Department of Ed have to expand to manage all these ESA accounts? Doesn't sound like less government to this conservative. Actually, according to the bill, that responsibility would be put on the state treasurer's office, with fees taken out of the fund to pay for it. The treasurer may also contract with a private management firm to manage it, and they will be in charge of auditing the program. There will also be an oversight committee consisting of 6 parents, which one assumes would be volunteer. Sandy asks, if private schools receive state money through vouchers or ESAs, do they have to accommodate all students? Those who don't speak English, special education through a student's 21st birthday in some cases. Public schools are required to accommodate for all students. In fact, Sandy, there's a section that says there will be no state control over any non-public schools. They don't have to change how they do things. No strings attached.
One thing to keep in mind is this is not about parental choice. They keep saying this is about parental choice. This is about the students the private and religious schools choose to admit. And for whatever reason, they're low achievers, they're special needs, autistic, whatever it is, the school can simply say, well, we just don't have enough room right now.
Which is why Ron in Meridian believes the giant sucking sound you will hear is that of ordinary Idahoan tax dollars going to wealthy private schools, while rural Idaho schools are already crumbling. The first draft of this plan puts aside $20 million to pay for it. And Rod Grammer says we have about 15, 17, maybe 18,000 kids across the state in private school. And if all of them sign up for this, well, we're going to be upwards of 100 million like that. If Idaho's education savings account bill was in fact modeled after Arizona's, they didn't include the part where Arizona set up 2 different education budgets. One bucket for public school, another bucket for these ESAs. Idaho's would be a direct deduction from the public school budget, which means how much money these districts have to spend every year could be pretty fluid. And parents can sign up their students anytime, but funds would have to be divvied up, I should say, by JFAC in January for the following school year, so that way they would know what they have to spend. But we do not know yet when this bill will get a public hearing in the Senate Education Committee, but you can bet questions like these that we just talked about will be brought up. The other big story this week was the reintroduction of a transgender bill that would make it a felony for anyone to give puberty blockers, hormone therapy, or perform gender reassignment surgery to anyone under 18 who is, as Representative Bruce Skog wrote in his bill, struggling with gender dysphoria. House Bill 71, or the Vulnerable Child Protective Act, was brought up again by Republican Representative Bruce Skog. He wants to amend an existing law against female genital mutilation passed in 2019. He wants to include these transgender treatments and to also include male genitalia. Representative Skog tried this last year with a possible punishment of life in prison. This time, he reduced it to 10 years in prison. So to reinforce their argument that Idaho needs a law like this, the Idaho Freedom Foundation paid for a woman from California to come in and make the case against minors making a gender transition. Chloe Cole says she began exploring the idea of transitioning to a boy at age 12, a journey into gender dysphoria, she says, encouraged by what she saw online. After a therapist affirmed Chloe's identity, she says she started taking puberty blockers at 13 and had a double mastectomy at 15. Says she was told her only treatment was to transition.
My parents, and especially my dad, initially objected to this. And they wanted me to wait until I was 18 and responsible for myself to make the decision. But their hand was forced by the doctors. They were told that there really wasn't any other option. None other had been presented to them. And they said that there was less than a 1% to 2% regret rate, that it was clinically insignificant. And if I were not affirmed in my identity, they said I would be at risk of suicide. Gender dysphoria really is a mental health condition. And yet we're treating it with surgeries and physical interventions. There is not a single other mental health condition that we do the same with. And yet it's perfectly fine for children who wrongly feel that they're the opposite sex to be mutilated and castrated.
Chloe says she stopped her hormone therapy at the age of 16, but that is just one woman's transition story. And there are others for sure, and actually from those from Idaho that tell a different side to this. And we spoke to one Boise family who would truly be impacted by this legislation, Preston Thompson and his transgender teen-age daughter, Lynn.
That's made me happier. That's been a good thing for me, and my legal name change was a very good thing.
That's one of several changes in Lynn's life. She's a 16-year-old transgender girl.
Her safety is our top concern.
With the full support of her father, Preston.
Like, we've known since Lynn was about 6. I think I mentioned that last time that we talked.
Like, how would you know that? For me, I could always sort of feel like I didn't really get bad gender dysphoria until like puberty started happening, and then it just kept getting worse. But like, when I was a little kid, I always just like, I was like, huh. Like about being a guy, and I always identified more with and like felt more like a girl, but like I just didn't have the language or like means to express what I meant by that.
A large part of that expression today is puberty blockers and estrogen hormones. No surgeries right now.
There's a term called gender euphoria, as the exact opposite of gender dysphoria in the trans community. That happens when you finally like look in the mirror and see like yourself.
Do you see yourself?
Yes. A lot more than I used to.
I don't know any parent or, and very few even trans kids who are trying to jump to a surgical intervention route. We did not have pressure from the medical community at all. And if somebody was pushing that on her, that's deplorable. That's not something that should happen. I can tell you that here in Idaho, the clinic that we work with Lynn, the pediatrician that we've worked with, there has been respect and there has been a lot more listening than talking.
Is that a reality? Did you experience anything like that?
I did not experience anything encouraging me to be trans. Like, it just really sucks how people have been portraying it as like they've been groomed into this.
Well, yesterday, probably the best text we received after we aired that story was the one from Barb that said, Preston Thompson is the dad all kids deserve. And she's right. But we got a lot more than that. Like this one from James in Boise. It's a sad commentary of our politics and society when a political party pays someone that represents less than 1% of their demographic to demonize and use government power to target and hurt people. Everyone involved in that hearing and everyone involved in drafting and passing anti-trans legislation should be ashamed, particularly for a party that claims to promote Christian values to have a political platform based on almost exclusively fear and cruelty. I have serious doubts that gender dysphoria is anything more than a psychological issue, says Ron. To subject a minor to the extremes of transitioning strikes me as an inappropriate response. But for politicians to try to impose their beliefs on these families is just extremists, politicizing what should remain personal medical decisions. Again, says Ron in Nampa. I'm afraid there will come a time in Idaho when everyone, no matter what you believe, will be subject to legislative scrutiny. I just hope they don't come after left-handed people, says Mike in Caldwell. That's a good point. We don't allow children to vote, smoke, drink before they are adults. Why? Because it's an important decision that needs some thought that is made with a more mature adult brain. Why should hormone blockers or reassignment surgery be any different? Let these children dress, behave as they feel, but wait until they're an adult to make such a permanent decision. Well, kudos to the Idaho Republican Party legislators for trying to fix more problems that don't exist and spending our tax dollars codifying their narrow-minded views, said David in Boise County. Cheers to Preston Thompson and his child for standing up for their rights. It is ironic that you can refuse to give your child medical care due to religious beliefs, but if your child is transgender, then the government will handle it, says Jeff in Middleton. When is the Idaho legislature going to get out of our bedrooms, our bathrooms, and doctors' offices? That's a good question sent in. My free will is not for anyone but me. So that's how that wrapped up for that. And we appreciate all your comments. We've got a few more coming up right after this.
As you're getting ready for the weekend, let me tell you what's going on for this weekend in the weather, okay? First of all, this is what's going to happen by the time we get to late Sunday night into early Monday morning in the mountains. Look for a snowy day on Sunday. So if you're going up to McCall Winter Carnival, expect the fact that if you're coming back on Sunday, you're going to run into some snow up there. There might be some light snow Sunday morning in Boise, but it's going to be turning to rain, and there could be some light amounts in Twin Falls, and that's going to be by this Sunday. So you can see it here on Sunday. Tomorrow's a dry day, but the clouds increase. Storm system comes in, could change it to some rain. Some light snow showers are still possible Monday morning, but very early before you get up. Next Wednesday, there's another storm. There's your 7 days.
Hi, my name is Christine. I don't want to leave any other information, but I was watching the news, and I actually, the 208, I just wanted to thank them. I'm getting a whole $25 back Woohoo! Thank you very much.
Woohoo! Christine found out she had 25 bucks coming to her. Well, how? I'll tell you. After we did a story on all the unclaimed property Idaho's treasurer's office is holding on to, a lot of you looked into it. Wednesday was National Unclaimed Property Day, and Idaho has a lot of that, as we said, $228 million worth. So Andrew Bartline went out to see if he could help some of those people claim theirs.
What's lost has to be found, right?
Does losing my mind count?
Jody Maltaire's been there before.
Yeah, I guess I've lost things. I lost a pair of AirPods one time on an airplane, and I'll just misplace things here and there.
But in the great state of Idaho,
I feel comfortable here. I feel at home.
lost property would be returned to its rightful owner, right?
No idea.
Turns out,
So those things are common.
Idaho
As a
State
matter of
Treasurer
fact-
Julie Ellsworth says the state holds on to a lot of money that's not theirs.
As a matter of fact, we have $228 million that needs to be claimed in the state of Idaho. State treasurers are heightening the need for people to come and claim their lost money.
The message extends to businesses too. A quick trip around the block shows the Matador on 8th Street can claim up to $50 from an internet provider. And just up the road, St. Michael's Parish is due a whopping $7 in total, owed from a bank and a power provider.
It's happening all over the United States, so we have a network with everybody in the United States. If you've forgotten things in New York City, there's a way for you to claim that. But by law, companies and businesses want to clear their books, and by law they can sweep those lost items that people have not claimed for over a year. They can take them off their books and remit them to us to hang on to. We hold on to them until they're claimed, and in the meantime we work to find the owners.
Owners.
Well, that's definitely me. There's not too many Maltairs in the valley.
That includes Jody.
So it looks like I've got some money owed by Delta Dental, J.P. Morgan, 5 cents. That's a good one. Delta's looks pretty substantial.
Like $100.
Interesting.
And completely unexpected.
No idea. I haven't been a Delta dental user in probably 8 or 9 years.
Meaning the Treasury has held it for the same amount of time.
There's some people that find $30,000. I think 2 months ago, I think that was the highest one that was returned. Last year we returned $16 million back to the rightful owners. Wow. Kind of feel like Santa Claus.
And the gifts can go a long ways, even if the return is a comparably small sum.
And hopefully it'll be enough money to claim it'll pay for my lunch.
To foot the next bill.
Absolutely. I hope anybody watching probably ought to go check it out and find out if they're owed something.
Again, a lot of you did. The treasurer's office says they also get abandoned safe deposit boxes. These items are auctioned off, but the cash from those sales, well, those are still owed to the family of the original deposit box, which is how some people might be surprised to see some significant dollars by their name when they log on to the website. Christine, not the only one who found some cash belonging to her. See this one from Laura. The question on the unclaimed property says, if there are several people in the same area with the same name, how can you ascertain it is you, especially when it's coming from a utility company or services that services the whole area? Simple answer, Laura. When you go through the process to claim your property, they ask for your social security number. And supposedly there's only one of you that has that number. Just checked and found I'm owed 1 cent, says John Arisman. 1 cent. He is celebrating tonight. I assume last night. Maybe it didn't extend it tonight. Thank you for the segment on yourmoneyidaho.gov. I got back over 50 bucks. I owe you a beer. Well, that sounds like a little bit more than one beer, Steve. Just saying. By the way, let's say you log on to yourmoneyidaho.gov and you decide you don't really need that 15 cents that is owed to you. Well, there's an option there to donate. Also, since we ran this story, the state treasurer has had more than 2,800 claims filed in just 2 days, and they've returned more than $1.3 million so far. So if you want to help take a chunk out of that $228 million and rightfully claim that money that belongs to you, just go to ktvb.com, and we have a link to that website in this story. Oh, welcome back. Final minute of the show on this Friday is wrap up the week with some of your comments, like this one from Chris Meridian. Are teachers at private schools required to be certified educators, or can anyone be hired to teach your children? Well, at private schools, they have certain standards, I'm sure, but when you're homeschooling, no requirements whatsoever, according to the state of Idaho. Also, is there any oversight of those schools? No, there is not. Home or private. How about special education students? Are there accommodations for them? Depends on the school, Chris. So if you have a question, you probably should contact that school. Why is there any discussion about private and religious schools in our legislature? There should be no discussion. Pay for those items with private dollars, not taxes, says Terry. How about this one? Just how many private or religious schools are in Idaho? Where are they located? That's a good question. There's 119 right now, thereabouts, in the state of Idaho. I looked. 33 of them are in Ada County. 20 of Idaho's 44 counties have no access to private school whatsoever. So there's a large concentration here in the Treasure Valley, and only 119, 120 so far across the entire state of Idaho. So there's a lot of that when it comes to private school options, not accessible in Idaho. Tax money for education belongs to the taxpayers, not the students. I pay for public education, not private, says Kurt from Boise. These are all good points. And again, you can watch all of those stories at ktvb.com. We can find the complete interviews that we did on all the stories that we did this week. How can Idaho be 51st if there are only 50 states, asked Dan in Emmett? Well, they included Washington, D.C. in those studies, so there's that. Brian, I like your summer attire. Looks like you just came from Lemonade social event. How do you know I'm not headed to a Lemonade social event?